you've got to figure out how do you craft an activity that is meaningful for the student where they want to write it.
If we create a writing assignment that is meaningful to them, that's contextually important to them, then they will be invested in it.
This week on My Robot Teacher, we talked to two writing professors about how to use AI in the composition classroom in ways that actually develop students' critical judgment and self-reflection.
Hi, everyone. I'm Aparna Sinha. I am an associate professor of composition and rhetoric in the English department at Poly Maritime Academy.
I'm Carl Whithaus. I'm a professor of writing and rhetoric and director of the writing program at the University of California, Davis.
We explore how AI tools can either erase student voice by standardizing language or empower students to make deliberate choices about when to code mesh and when to conform. Why meaningful assignments are the antidote to AI shortcuts, and whether we're heading toward a post-literate world where making meaning in a variety of new forms matters more than traditional writing skills.
Our big questions this week: how do we teach AI literacy so it narrows equity gaps and centers process over product? And if traditional texts aren't the only literacy anymore, what remains essential about writing in a multimodal world? This is My Robot Teacher.
Carl Whithaus and Aparna Sinha led a training workshop on the Cal Poly Solano campus on August 11th for faculty across a variety of disciplines participating in the PAIR project. That's with 2 R's, and it stands for Peer and AI Review and Reflection. It's a 3-year project involving over 1,500 faculty and somewhere between 12,000 and 17,000 students over that 3-year period. And it's trying to integrate AI into college writing courses in a way that promotes critical AI literacy and ethical use while keeping a human element throughout the peer review process while promoting student reflection.
In short, the project teaches students to balance multiple types of feedback, both human and AI, to develop critical judgment about what advice to implement and what to ignore.
Aparna is also a PI on another shorter project, which involves 1 year of data collection, assessing, and trying to bridge equity gaps with AI literacy in gateway math and writing courses, some of the most foundational introductory courses most college students take. We should also, in the interest of full disclosure, mention that Taiyo and I are both guinea pigs right now in these experiments. My fall 2025 composition class is one of the classes using the My Essay Feedback platform and the PAIR AI literacy framework.
And I'm part of Aparna's other project, looking at equity gaps with AI literacy in foundational math courses.
We spent an hour after the workshop chatting with Carl and Aparna. Here's what they had to say.
So Aparna, you've used AI in the classroom for a couple years now. Is that typical for people in your field?
You know, I have had some of my colleagues who were so against it. Oh, I don't want to deal with AI. I don't want any AI policy, nothing to do with AI in their classes. But I feel like AI literacy is analogous to sex education. You know, if you don't teach sex education, it leads to all kinds of problems. And AI literacy education is also like that. So if we are afraid of teaching about AI education to our students, we know we're basically enabling more problems to happen in the future.
I love that so much. It's such a good analogy.
And my project, especially with AI literacy and gateway writing courses, I feel like it's really important that we do that right at the beginning when they have just started the college level. And right now, they have no idea what to do with AI. They're just coming into school. And students who don't learn AI literacy early will either avoid it entirely out of fear of getting in trouble or use it recklessly without understanding the consequences, which is why I say it is analogous to sex education. But additionally, in the case of AI education, this creates an equity gap because students from college-educated, tech-savvy families can still get informed guidance at home.
You know, I'm not even sure tech-savvy families know how to advise their kids these days. This is all so new and like really rapidly changing. Maybe we shouldn't assume that college-educated parents are themselves going to be all that AI literate and giving good advice to their kids about LLMs.
That's true. I totally agree. But my point is that students from college-educated families often get informal guidance around academic norms and technology use that first-generation students miss.
Carl, In what ways do you see AI creating or amplifying inequities in writing education?
I mean, one of the challenges around educational equity is making sure that students from all sorts of backgrounds have equitable access to technologies, chances to use it, and also that students have a way of recognizing their own languages, their own dialects in part of the serious academic work that we're doing. And large language models have been trained on mostly standardized English. They tend to be easily able to, sort of whitewash language. And I think there's really interesting equity questions. We've noticed this with multilingual international students who want to use the tool to turn in a paper that's in standardized English. Now, on some levels, you can see a real argument for an interesting type of equity, which is, oh, it provides a tool. You can then turn in something that'll get a higher grade that's using standardized English. This is a good thing. But if you're doing that and you're erasing voice, you're discriminating against world Englishes and you're valuing only one type of English because it's in the large language model, that's a huge equity problem. And as we think about these questions around equity, I think we need to invite our students as well as faculty at the community colleges, CSUs, UCs into this conversation so that people, as they're writing with tools influenced by large language models, are aware of the choices that they're making. If I'm using this tool and it's standardizing my English, then what's being lost? If I'm not able to use the tool because I fear that I'm going to be, slapped on the hand for cheating because it doesn't sound like me, so the deliberate choice and agency as opposed to letting the tool dominate and dictate what type of language is being used, I think is hugely important and is an equity question. I don't know where ultimately an individual student will land in terms of if they want to use it. My hope is that they want to have more control of their own voice and can decide when they're using standardized English, when they're code meshing and empowered in their own voice to do serious academic work. I want the students to have that choice and make that as a deliberate decision. And that to me is is the way to get at equity, I think, through this.
We have an audience of faculty in a ton of different disciplines. So can you define what code meshing is? I think
Sure.
it's super important.
Yeah. So there used to be this discussion about code switching within writing studies. And code switching was, people speak one way when they're at home, and then in school, they speak another way. And this is code switching. And there used to be, back in the 1990s, this huge move to teach code switching. And the problem with only teaching code switching is then the single dominant white
Voices.
English becomes the academic voice, and you leave home discourse at home and that's it. But then that just perpetuates all these racist stereotypes, power dynamics. Code meshing is a way of challenging that, where you think about the serious work that all types of languages and all types of Englishes can do, and how do you bring that into the academic space?
Code meshing is when we intentionally combine multiple languages or dialects of English in one text to empower our writers and celebrate the complexity and the fluidity of language. And one of the things that code switching does, it just enforces the idea that, I should be speaking and writing in this way because this is correct, this is more academic, this is more formal. And my background and my vernacular or my culture and language that I speak and other situations with my family or my culture is not that great. And so, but the code meshing really says, no, you get to use both and they're both valuable. Standard English is not any better than the other.
Has there been work in understanding to what extent these large language models could possibly do a little bit of code meshing themselves? In other words, like adopt some of the dialects, I guess, or the maybe graphilex or whatever of other kinds of communities, so that it's not just, everything gets translated into the standard English, but rather that students who maybe are accustomed to using standard English can be exposed to their ideas being rendered in a completely different and perhaps very foreign kind of dialect. Has there been any work in that?
I don't know at the top of my head.
That's okay. Yeah.
But I know there's one thing that I do in my class which demonstrates that really well to my students, because I talk about, hey, the importance of your voice. And I have a compilation of student quirky writing pieces that I've put together. And then I showed, and I've asked students if I could use it and plug it in AI. And I show them that, hey, look, this is written by, and just short paragraphs from different students. Look, when you read it, you can see the student's voice coming in and student's identity. When you read it, you know it's not written by AI. Now let's plug this into AI and see what it does and how it edits this. Mm-hmm. And I do that with my students in classroom, and they see that it totally diminishes the voice and it standardizes it. And so my intuitive understanding is that ChatGPT or other AIs currently don't have so much data set that includes and incorporates English or languages from other cultures.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I guess there is a reason why we think of standardized English as being the hegemonic
exactly.
dialect.
Yeah.
And ChatGPT is going to reflect that bias for sure.
To bring it back to voice for a second, so one of the things that also struck me about your workshop is how it seemed like what you're doing in this research is taking what are like rigorously demonstrated best practices in rhetoric and composition education and saying these are the fundamentals. How do we then use AI or bring AI into the picture in a way that's preserving those fundamentals? And so you mentioned things like voice, peer review, also like collaboration. I sort of got a sense that the community aspect of writing or writing with others and communicating with others. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what you see as the fundamentals that you believe, like what is the most important thing that you're doing when you're teaching writing?
I think one of the things in Comp and Read that's so important is process versus product. And I feel like Pear is really enforcing that really well, considering the fact that we do, peer feedback, then AI feedback, and then faculty feedback, and then a reflection on all the feedback that you got, which is to say to students, if you get a prompt and you plug it in AI, you didn't go through the process of writing that enables so much critical thinking, that helps you learn how to write. And that process is important because writing is not a product, right? Even now, after many years of writing, I never write anything and say, oh, it's done. I keep working on it. Yeah, I feel process versus product.
The question now, though, is that students are opting to use AI because they see the assignment as meaningless. They don't care. Like the writing, I just need to. If you've got to figure out how do you craft an activity that is meaningful for the student where they want to write it. And then now if they're writing it and using pieces of AI technology and they're still learning things, that's actually probably good. The danger is when the assignment is so stupid, they just need to do it. They can plop the assignment criteria in, use, whether it's Grok, ChatGPT 5, whatever engine, generate the good enough essay by 11:50 at not 55 at night, 5 minutes, they're done. That's because the assignment isn't engaging them in meaningful activity.
Absolutely.
Process and deliberate sense about process, about peer review, about community is where the learning occurs. And just because we've shifted from just a word processor to AI tools doesn't mean that the process has disappeared. We need to figure out how to make that process meaningful. And I think connecting with community, connecting with peers, connecting with teacher, getting genuine feedback in terms of also what the writers want to produce is hugely important.
Yeah.
And Aparna mentioned earlier the importance of changing assessment models. There's been a lot of work around moving towards contract rating, where the student writer gets to articulate, this is what I value. Our portfolio methods, reflecting and thinking about, these are the valuable things that I got out of this sequence of assignments. That feels like where the real learning is occurring. And I think peer review, I think reflection, I think contract grading are all strategies that we can use no matter what the writing technology is. And we just need to highlight those and talk about those more.
And these have been around for a very long time, right?
Right.
That's, it's something I think it's important to emphasize.
Well, but they have to get updated. That is, we
Right.
can't simply take strategies that were developed. And you asked this question about voice that I think is really important. Voice, like, used to be in writing studies, folks like Peter Elbow, everybody was interested in
Right.
voice in the 80s and 90s. And then voice to me feels like it's disappeared.
Yeah.
And at this most recent 4Cs, so the
Precipice-
conference, the
Precipice
conference on
pedagogy.
conference on college composition
Yeah.
and communications, 4Cs, I noticed a lot of talk about hybrid voice. And I went to like every session that was on AI, and suddenly people are talking about voice again, but they're talking about hybrid voice. Like, how do we allow students to maintain their own voice, but also work with pieces of technology? So it feels like there's this really old concept, voice, but that it's coming back with like a new intensity, a new something in 2025.
Right. Because we've been arguing in Comp and Red about standard English for a long time, right? When we teach writing, should we be valuing students' vernacular or should we be enforcing academic English because they're here to learn how to write in college and sound formal and academic? And I remember having these discussions, 10 years ago in grad school, and there was never the right answer because we always had people who were like, no, academic English, this is what we're here for.
Right.
And we've also had people who are like, no, but your cultural language is also important. Yeah.
We haven't yet figured out how do we get large language models to value code meshing. There's been some interesting work where the stereotypes back from large language models in 2022, 2023, if you ask it to produce something in Black vernacular English, it would produce the most racist shit you can imagine. And the language models are a little tiny bit better, but they're still not. The problem is the base that they've been trained on reproduces so much racist stereotype when you ask to do variety of languages that we really need students, faculty, consumers to think about how could we have a large language model, or maybe it's small language models that could represent varieties of English as opposed to one dominant standard model. And then anytime you ask for a different variety, it produces pretty much of a racist stereotype of that voice, which is problematic on a whole other level. Yeah.
So how did you end up working at the intersection of writing and technology? Like, what prepared you for this moment when AI suddenly becomes everyone's concern?
I started, 1990s old HTML code. And it's interesting, I was doing my English PhD at CUNY, so City University of New York at the Graduate Center. And I had went in and I wasn't sure if I wanted to work on information technology, like where we were with computers in 1995, or if I wanted to work on writing technologies like printing presses and things like that, and their broad historical scope. And I got to the point of writing the dissertation, and it was really clear that I wanted to think about how students were writing and in ways in which standardized testing was asking people to sit down and write an hour exam by hand. And all my students were producing stuff, grammar check, spell check, all these things. And I was like, I really want us to be doing literacy activities that are today that people are writing about. So we need to study this. And pretty much the last 20 or 30 years, I've played with writing technologies and how do we incorporate the latest pieces in our college courses. And then November 2022 came along and suddenly the whole world was interested in writing technologies. And practices that we've learned over the last 20 to 30 years still speak. It's not like folks in writing studies haven't been thinking about writing technologies and now have things to say about best practices. When we think about PAIR, for instance, it's not just AI feedback, it's the peer review, the human in the loop, the practices of how do we get students to comment on each other's writing. It's building both of those things in that are important. So it's, for me, I think it's been a long interest in human and computer sort of interaction. How do those two things build off of each other? And that feels like really vital as part of the pair project.
So I'm wondering if you all have any thoughts about the potential for AI to sort of accelerate interdisciplinarity.
Yeah, so I'm going to use this as sort of a shout out to the project that you're working on with Cal Poly Solano that you're partnered with just UC Davis on. So it's two colleges,
And UCSC.
and UCS, yeah, where there's three colleges on it, and you're really thinking about connections between math and writing at sort of the first year level and how AI works, because that to me really is tremendously exciting in terms of interdisciplinarity, not, between four PhDs in a room, but students who are coming into college thinking about what are the basic skills in terms of quantitative math work and in terms of writing.
Right. I mean, and that project was, with the vision of like, oh, we're going to combine these two disciplines and see what's happening with respect to AI and students' use of AI in these two disciplines. And we see a lot of similarity in the problems that they're facing with AI. Absolutely, writing part is more developed, I feel, for students to cheat. But I feel, in math, it's a little bit more problematic. I just interviewed a few students who are participating in the project in the math, and I asked them, how has it been using AI to learn math? And a lot of students said it was really difficult because I was really already struggling with the concept. And when I asked AI to explain it to me, I got even more confused because I had to read so much. And I had to go through so much explanation. I just wanted someone to really explain it to me in its simple terms. And I don't hear that with my writing students. But it was really interesting for me to interview the math students and the problems. And I had no idea that those are the kind of problems that they're dealing with, where, AI was making mistake and they didn't know. And so there was a lot of reflection for students to be like, okay, AI made mistake. What did you learn from, using AI to support your learning in math? And so we asked the same question in writing. What did you learn about your own critical thinking when you used AI to support your learning in writing? And so I think in both disciplines, there is critical thinking happening. And I don't know if we're bridging both of those two disciplines in any way, but we are seeing that there is, there's so much similarity in understanding students' use of AI in both the disciplines.
So one other thing, though, about that question is, so I was at the National Workshop on Data Science Education, actually, in part because the California Education Learning Lab had a AI in Education Day. And I don't know that I would have gone to that conference except for being part of the Learning Lab grant. But I think I've been learning more in the last 3 years about computer science, about data science, about things that have been important for me, but not like foregrounded for the last 20 or 30 years, in ways in which disciplines like the data science folks are having a crisis that's not unlike the crisis in writing studies or in the humanities around AI. And I don't know that faculty are always talking across disciplines to each other.
That's true.
I mean, questions around like writing and coding, in some ways, as someone in writing studies, I have more in common right now with colleagues in computer science than I do necessarily with other faculty in the humanities, because we're talking about the same challenges that AI is posing for our fields, and we don't always have the language to talk to each other.
Right.
And so it's sort of a puzzle of how do we bring together research trajectories, expertise to talk about the it's not even a social problem, it's more of a pedagogical curriculum problem that we're faced with in disciplines that range from computer science and data science to humanities. And I think the different disciplines and areas of expertise have a lot to say to each other, but we haven't figured out what the language is to do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I mean, our goal with this project in writing and math, and we've been thinking about, okay, well, should we write two different we should publish two different papers? Or should we publish one paper that kind of talks about some of the similarities that we're seeing in gateway writing and math?
Mhm.
And it has absolutely bridged the gap because like there are things that, our math professors at UCSC is doing and the math professors at SLO are doing, and they're different, even within the same discipline,
Mhm.
in incorporating AI. And then when I go in and I understand 50% of the stuff, but I'm like, oh, that's great that you were asking these questions when you do AI integrated activities. These are great questions. It is enabling, that the one understanding AI and how AI functions and how you can learn with AI. And I'm really excited about that part. It's like, that both the disciplines have this critical thinking going on and we're learning and AI is impacting that learning.
So in a recent episode, when we spoke to Chesak Kaparas and Pranav Anand, we talked about how AI literacy has to include emotional awareness and social awareness. It seems to me that pair also hinges in a way on that self and social awareness. So I'm wondering if you see those as core to AI literacy too, and if so, how does reflection prioritize them?
Yeah, when you mention social and emotional engagement with AI as a vital part of critical AI literacy, that seems right. I mean, it seems right to me as someone who's working on pair with two R's, right? I mean, it's peer and AI review and plus, I mean, reflection is the second R, which reflection for us is really metacognition. And, in the workshop, we talked about reflecting immediately on two pieces of peer feedback and a piece of AI feedback, making a decision, and then also having that revision memo at the end. So clearly, metacognition is vital for the project that we're working on because you're making decisions not about writing just based on instant AI feedback, but what has the AI told me that's useful? What have my peers told me that's useful? What do I actually want to use? Where do those things contradict each other? So I'm going to drop somebody's advice. I'm not always dropping the AI advice. I'm not always dropping the human advice. Different humans are going to give me different pieces of advice. What do different AI large language models might give me different pieces of it? How do I sort through that different type of feedback? That's where the reflection and metacognition comes in, I think, in a really vital way.
That seems to me so fundamental, the ability to recognize and cut through what the advice that is going to lead you to have the most effective communication that you can. Right?
Well, and it's not just a question about effective communication because that assumes like it's a neutral situation. So I'm reminded of Sophia Noble's, Algorithms of Oppression. Her work is very much about the algorithms are not neutral. We're thinking social, emotional, political, economic, like these things are weighted. We need folks who are undergraduates in college to have conversations about a bias in algorithms, how these things might be shaping us, so that they can then make more active decisions about which pieces that they want to use and not use. And I think it probably goes back to questions of liberal arts education, but the values of a liberal arts education, whether someone, no matter which field, STEM, technology, education, mathematics, humanities, social sciences, no matter which of those fields you're going into, how do those values of curiosity, reflection get brought in and integrated in the curriculum throughout?
Yeah. I recently read an article by Inoue Reddy, etc. All there are multiple. And they talk about AI literacy should incorporate, ability to decipher an AI output and analyze it. And also ability to see what are the biases and stereotypes that are present in the AI output. So basically, we should be teaching our students to analyze AI output and say, hey, what part of it is useful to you? And what part is useless to you? Or what part is something that you can, again, use to support your own understanding? And so we're basically teaching students to understand the problems that AI would be creating and be smarter than AI to say, okay, that's not good enough. This is not going to work for me for what I need. So when it comes to AI literacy and also prompt engineering, and like what should I be putting in and why the AI output was this way, what can I do to make it better? I feel like all of those things we should be teaching students. That is part of AI education. And if we're not teaching them any of this, then we're basically enabling them to abuse and misuse AI.
So we're in summer 2025.
Yeah.
This academic year is about to start for, I think, all of us, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to be seeing lots of first-year students coming into our classroom. Now, this isn't a question I would get. I would get the question, what is the math that I'm here learning? What is that good for? And I've got my set of responses to that. When a student comes to you and asks you, why do we still need to learn how to write?
Yeah.
What do you say to them?
See, one thing that I feel the idea is that we want to tell our students that writing enables critical thinking. Writing will enable you to think critically. It will enable you to learn things better and also advocate for yourself better. It will teach you how to voice your opinion. It will teach you how to ask for things that you need. And all of those things are going to ultimately help you in life. And you want to have those skills. Those are things that I will start with. But I think the point that you made initially is that we have to make writing meaningful to them. We have to give them assignments that makes them feel, oh, good is going to come out of me trying to decipher how to write this assignment. If the assignment is not good, then they are going to take the shortcut. And they're going to say, okay, what's the right answer? Tell me, feed the right answer, and I'll give you that right answer that I copied. But if we create a writing assignment that is meaningful to them, that's contextually important to them, then they will be invested in it. One assignment that I do in my writing classes, I ask them to think about a problem that is annoying them and think about an audience who can actually solve that problem for them. And how will they go about writing that? And it's always a hit because I tell them it could be any problem. And so they choose, oh, I want to break up with my girlfriend. I want to write about that. Or I want to tell my parents how they're annoying me. And they get invested in, this is my problem. I can't ask AI to write this answer for me. This is my problem. I have feelings about this problem and I want to express them. And so they end up not using AI and they write substantial amount of what they feel about this. Yes, they might use AI to edit the stuff, but if they're invested in what we give them, they will want to write. I really do think that they will. So yeah, I know I will have to do some convincing why we should learn to write.
Yeah.
You're totally right. I will have to do some convincing. And I also feel that they are right to say, hey, why should I write?
Right.
We should have that conversation in our writing classes. And I appreciate you for asking that question.
Well, I mean, and in some ways, it's the question. So what Carol Jago from UCLA was saying is that the value of writing is the process, is the struggling. It's also the works that you're reading and thinking through so that they are meaningful for you as the student, as opposed to generating the same term paper that every student has generated before. So I think in some ways it's this, like your example of your assignment where it's a problem that's meaningful for you. I can see students taking that and, like, in some ways a student would be like, oh my God, I have to make up a problem. Okay, let me pretend that I have to break up with my girlfriend. I'm going to ask AI about it. And so they could fake it, or it could be a genuine, and we've seen this actually where people are going to AI for like therapy or helping figure things out. But that's interesting to me because the chatbot is being used as a therapist, is standing in, and the student, or just a person, is like writing with it and taking bad advice, good advice. But I think becoming aware of writing technologies and how they're bumping up against our lives, potential harms from them, but also potential ways that we could use them, like oh my God, I'm so worried about my piece of writing. I don't even want to share it with my roommate or a peer review. Oh, I share it with AI before and I've gotten advice and I feel more confident about it. But we need to allow them to be able to say, I shared this with AI, I got feedback from it, and be transparent about the use of things. So I think your question of what's the value of writing, I think the value of student writing is definitely process. It's also community where you're sharing it with others. And there has to be a value where there's a transparency where a student can acknowledge how they've used tools, and not automatically and actually, this is a really important thing. Students are terribly confused because different professors are giving them completely different advice. We need to figure out how to let them know that you're going to get different advice and you got to figure out in this class I can use it, this class I can't, what the stance is. And then I think there's a way in which faculty often forget that their students' perspectives on AI are a spectrum. That is, I have students who are going into design, who are taking my writing and visual rhetoric class, and we never dream of using AI at all. Like they see it as completely smashing creativity, intellectual property. I have other students who are doing UX design, right, user experience work, and they're like, of course you got to use AI, but like students are not a monolith. Students are not all like, oh, I'm going to cheat all the time with it. We need faculty to recognize there's a range of perspectives, but we also need faculty to give students really clear guidance, at least in an individual class, about you can play with these tools, you can't play with these tools in this class. Because you get students who are like, I could never use any form of AI because I'm immediately going to be accused of cheating. We need to disambiguate things for students.
So we all know that there was a pre-literate time. There was a time when in humanity's history when there was no such thing as writing or as reading, right?
Yeah.
And yet there was still things being communicated, right? Can we imagine, so this, we might call this a pre-literate time.
Right.
Can we imagine a post-literate, non-dystopian world?
Well, so history of writing is great to ask about for math because guess where writing started from? Started from math, started from counting. Like,
oh, is that right?
Yeah. I mean, like, literally, people in Mesopotamia they made little pouches and they put things in them that symbolized like sheep, like 4 little stones that looked like sheep, and you closed it up, and then you had it closed up, and someone came in with the idea of, on the outside of it, I'm going to put 4 little marks that indicate that I owe you 4 sheep and turn it back. And then you could actually start writing. So there is a pre-literate time. And the first bit of literacy was actually counting. So you got this wonderful interdisciplinary stuff at the beginning. I think post-literate times might not be dystopian. I think literacy is going to shift, and we could talk about like secondary orality. And I do a lot of work with multimodality. So you're thinking about films and video and short explanations. And on one level, TikTok is horrifying. On another level, there's how can you use TikTok to get at really complex concepts? Is there a future world where there's less text-based writing that's not dystopian? Yeah. So the book Swarms, Viral Writing in the Local, right? So I just came out, really thinks about TikTok, thinks about wikis, thinks about Discord and students like writing in Discord, little tiny short bits and it's almost a post-literate world, but you have bits of text that are embodied with videos and sound. And if you look at Discord servers, and these things can be on gaming and stuff, there's a hell of a lot of complex thought that's going on. It's maybe the beginning of a post-literate world. And there are some Discord servers that are dystopian. There are others that really get that have complex problems that are being solved. And some of it's like, related to gaming, like how do I beat, level 32 on this game? But it's people from around the world coming together to solve a particular problem in a way that's maybe not entirely post-literate, but is multimodal literacy rather than alphabetic text literacy. And it's not always bad.
Yeah. How we make meaning could absolutely change.
Yeah.
But we will still need to make meaning.
Yeah.
That will never stop.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Thank you both so much.
So, Sarah, what's the takeaway from this week's interview?
If AI literacy is the new sex ed, then the first rule is talk about it. Early, honestly, and with some guardrails in place. I'm Sarah Senk.
And I'm Taiyo Inoue.
Thanks to our guests, Carl Whithaus and Aparna Sinha. We know the semester is just starting for a lot of you, and you've probably been thinking about how to incorporate AI into your classrooms. We'd love to hear about what you've been doing.
Email us at myrobotteacherpod@gmail.com and visit our website, myrobotteacher.ai. And connect with us on Substack, where we post all sorts of interesting AI tidbits and nuggets, including transcripts for every episode.
Thanks to the California Education Learning Lab, whose support makes this podcast possible. Word of mouth is our lifeblood, so if you're enjoying this podcast, please help us grow. Email this episode to your teaching and learning center or your writing program director, and share the podcast with colleagues on your campus or anyone you know who's wrestling with similar questions about AI. Thanks for listening.